On episode 369 of the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we welcome back Kathleen Trotter and discuss her new book, Your Fittest Future Self. You can find the full show notes for this episode at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/369. Have you decided you're ready to make a change? To reclaim your health and fitness? The 40 Plus Fitness podcast is here for you. I'm your host, Alan Meisner. I'm an NSAM certified personal trainer with a specialization in corrective exercise and fitness nutrition. Let me be your coach as you find your way on your health and fitness journey. All right, let's go. Our guest today is a personal trainer, nutritionist, life coach, and fitness writer. She has made contributions to the Globe and Mail and Huffington Post and makes frequent TV appearances. Today, we're going to talk about her book, Your Fittest Future Self. With no further ado, let's welcome back Kathleen Trotter. Kathleen, welcome to 40 Plus Fitness again.
Oh, I'm so excited to be back. I feel like you're sort of like my brother or something. Our messages totally overlap, so it's great.
They do. They do.
Who has a similar vision of health and fitness.
And that's what I say. As I was reading through your book, I'm like, this is this. There's so many parallels to the way that we think about health and fitness, and I love particularly that you, above all, I mean, probably more than most that I've talked to, understand the kind of the value of happiness and the value of taking this journey.
Important.
Yeah, and how we have to put this all together.
Yeah, what's the point of sort of being active and fit if you hate every single moment of it? Like, it's supposed to enrich your life, not detract from your life. I think about my parents a lot with this because, my dad, I think he's 77 now. He plays hockey 4 days a week. He rides his bike all around Montreal, which is like super hilly. He farms potatoes, and it's because he's so active and he's so joyful. Like, every day I phone him at the farm. He's like, "Oh, I just picked potatoes and I was out for a walk." And he just has this quality of life. And it's the same thing with my mom. She walks the dog, she gardens. And I can't imagine them if they weren't active, but they never wake up in the morning and think, "Oh, I have to, I have to go for a walk, or I have to walk the dog," or, it's a privilege to move in that way for them. And that really helped me why I move. If I'm in a bad mood, it's like, "Oh, I get to go for a walk and put me in a better mood. I get to see my friends and go to a fitness class." It's a joyful thing.
Yes, and I think that's one of the missing points that so many people have out there. There's that, and then I think the other one is that so many people, I'm partially at fault to this because I kind of view things as a journey as well. Is that we're going to get there? That there's some form of like destination, but in the
there's
book,
no end point.
Yeah, well, you come up with the Kathleen cycle. Can you kind of go through that Kathleen cycle a little bit? Because I think that pretty much articulates the way you see this.
Yeah, I think so. The cycle is, you act and then you learn from that act, and then you take that learning and then you act again. And I'll sort of break it down a little bit. I was a really unfit, unhappy, unhealthy teenager. And I think one of the reasons why I was sort of unhappy for a long time is that I felt that I had to be sort of perfect tomorrow. And that if I, had a cookie, well, that was the end of it. And then I might as well just like crawl into my bed again. And the thing about the growth mindset, which is that cycle of sort of you're acting and then you reflect, is that every opportunity or every experience is just opportunity to reflect and act and learn. So you get out of that shame cycle of like, "Oh, I'm just this terrible person. I might as well quit now." And instead you're like, "Oh, interesting. I had a cookie. Okay. Am I happy that I had that cookie? Is this, something that I loved and savored? And if so, fine. But did I have the cookie because I was sort of crabby at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and low blood sugar? And did I have a cookie because I didn't eat a good lunch? Or was I sad or depressed or angry?" And if that's the case, then you're like, "Okay, well, how do I learn from this experience? And how do I go forward from there?" So if you had the cookie at 3 o'clock because you didn't have a good enough lunch, or maybe you skipped lunch altogether, then you're like, "Okay, well, so tomorrow I have to build in a better lunch." But it allows you to sort of step back and objectively look at all your choices. And instead of shame spiraling into more bad choices, you can learn from it. You can make better choices tomorrow. I also think that it makes your history seem like a good thing, meaning I think a lot of people think, "Well, I've been unfit for 30 years or 20 years or 40 years or whatever, and I've never managed to changed the tides before. So why should I even start? And what I say to people is like, well, but as soon as you use that Kathleen cycle, as soon as you have a growth mindset, then everything you've done in the past is not a negative. It's just taken you to this part in your process. So, if when you were in high school, you loved playing hockey, then maybe what you need is to play hockey, or if you loved running, or if you loved the only time you've ever been healthy and fit is when you worked out with a friend, then maybe you need to get a fitness buddy, right? Like, so you can look back at your history and say, when have I been successful and how can I replicate those things? And when have I not been as successful and how can I not do that? Right. So if it's your birthday and you're like, this year I'm going to be fit. So look at the last 20 years and sort of think, okay, when have I best been on my health horse? And then go with those things, right? And so it's more optimistic, it's positive, but it's also just extremely helpful if you can learn from your experiences versus beating yourself up about them.
Yes, but my favorite part of that is the act, because even just kind of a small step forward can just be a huge momentum booster for your wellness. And when you are acting, at least you're doing something positive for yourself. And so I just really like that aspect of the way your cycle works.
Oh,
Now,
I love that. Yeah.
yeah.
Because acting is really key because we put off for tomorrow what we can do today. And I love what you just said, any small step. If you think about, the final coin that makes you a millionaire, yes, it's that final coin, but it's all the coins that came before, right? Or that final step up the mountain. But you have to start at the bottom of the mountain. So all of those little steps, they seem like nothing at the time, but eventually they accumulate, and then you sort of have your health drop buckets all add up, and your health bucket is overflowing. But if you never act, you never get that final step where you feel like, oh, I'm feeling good about myself. You have more energy. I'm sleeping better, and small things are so much more accomplishable. Like, if you think, oh God, tomorrow I have to be down 20 pounds. Well, you'll never start. But if you say, today I'm just going to drink a little bit more water and get a few more steps. Well, you can do that in the next 5 minutes.
Yes, and I think that's kind of where the disconnect for a lot of folks are. They look forward and they say, "Hey, I've got this big distance to go." And when they slip or anything goes wrong, they're so tied up in that they won't take the moment to kind of do that look back and say, "Well, look how far up the mountain I've actually gone."
Totally.
You
I
know,
also
and
think,
they can do that. They can do that for themselves based on the good things that they've done. Or, in my opinion, they can basically sit there and they can. And I'm not a big fan of self comparisons, but you can actually look at it and say, hey, I've done a lot of good things for my health, and I haven't done a lot of these bad things that I know that other people have done, and use those for the moments to sit there and say, okay, I'm on a ledge. I'm not on a plateau. I'm on a ledge. And if I keep moving across this ledge, I'm going to be able to work my way up the mountain again soon. I just have to keep taking those little steps.
yeah, the next positive step forward, no matter how small, you need to take. But I think part of it is that people look at, somebody like you or me who've written a health book and they think, well, those people never fall. They never deviate. They're
Well,
always
they
on
haven't. You haven't read
course.
my book yet, but
Right.
yes,
Okay. Okay. So
I sure. Yeah,
but I think like if you haven't read my book, like I talk about this in the book as well, but what I mean is when they look at us like on image, on social media, or even just the stereotype of sort of a fit person is a lot of people think they're just sort of perfect and they found motivation on the side of the road. And I guess my point is only that it's failing or falling or deviating off course, having those wobbles, that's an inherent part of any process. So as soon as you think you have to be perfect, well, you might as well not have never start. It's so disheartening. But as soon as you realize that it's not about not falling, it's about falling slightly less far, slightly less hard, slightly less intensely, and course correcting really quickly, and then learning from the experience. So 10 years ago, maybe my quote unquote fall would have been a couple days. I would have deviated off course. Maybe 15 years ago, I would have deviated for 3 or 4 days. And now it's like, okay, well, I can have some chocolate at dinner. And then the next day I wake up and I go for a walk and I go for a run or whatever. It's, I still sort of deviate or I have moments where I compare myself unproductively to other people or that I don't have the best internal dialogue or I skip a workout or whatever it is. But my falls are slightly less. intense, and I definitely course correct faster. And I think that's the trick. I think everybody listening just has to know that that's falling and getting up, like that's an inherent part of life. That's not a deviation from the process. That is the process of getting healthier. And learning, which situations you're more likely to fall in, so you can plan in advance not to do that. Like, I love chocolate, for example, so I don't have it in my house because I know that if I have it in my house, I will eventually eat it. So, but I don't particularly love chips. So if my partner James wants to have chips in the house, that doesn't really matter to me because I won't eat them. But we have sort of a rule where he doesn't bring chocolate into the house because he knows that that is just like my weakness. So if I want chocolate, I go to my mom's house. I have a nice, beautiful little piece of chocolate. I savor it with her. Or James and I go on a date and we get some beautiful, high quality chocolate ice cream and walk around, and it just would make it more special.
Absolutely. Yes. Now, in the book, you share what you call the 13 goals for your fittest future self. Do you mind sharing those goals and briefly going through each one?
Absolutely. I think the first one we've really talked about, which is just the learning through falling and knowing that falling is not a bad thing. It's part of the process. And I think the trick with that is that if you know that you're eventually, going to fall, that when that happens, and when I say fall, that's maybe eating, let's say we'll take a cookie, right? So people who think that a wobble is the end of the road, then they'll be like, oh, I already had one cookie, I might as well have five. Right. But if you sort of know, okay, I'm going to make mistakes, then you can say, okay, well, I've had one cookie, but one cookie is not the same as five cookies. Or, one glass of wine is not the same as five glasses. Like portions do count. Or another example would be, let's say you have to miss a workout for some work event, something gets called, and you're going to go to the gym after work. And you, instead of being like, ah, crap, I missed my workout, so I might as well have, some cookies at the office party or whatever event you're going to, have some fried food, that kind of continual down the shame spiral. You say to yourself, okay, well, I missed a workout, but that's okay. I don't also have to have a glass of wine. I don't also have to have dessert. And maybe while I'm going to the work party, I walk there as opposed to taking a cab, or I walk there as opposed to taking the subway or something like that. So it's about understanding that if you do veer off of your plan, always have a plan B, have a plan C, and then learn. And the second one is really connected, which is awareness. And I always say that awareness brings choice. I think a big part of our sort of health conundrum is that most of us aren't aware of what we do. We're not aware of what we eat. We're not aware of our movement. We're not aware of our sleep patterns, how much water we drink. So sometimes it's just really worth keeping a journal for a couple of weeks and seeing what you're eating, what you're feeling. That's a big thing. A lot of us eat when we're angry or sad or tired, right? So if you can sort of connect, oh my goodness, I'm always eating sugar on days that I don't get enough sleep, then that might motivate you to sleep. And just in general, being more aware will help you take what I call the pause, right? Because a lot of people say to me, well, I ate a cookie and then a glass of wine and then some ice cream, but it wasn't until after I ate it that I realized what I'd done. So, I say to people, before you eat anything, just take a moment and pause and sort of say, will my future self be happy if I eat this? Do I want this? Will this make me happy? Or really, do I just want to phone a friend? Like, am I seeking comfort? And that's really connected to just living like as if you love yourself, which is tip number three. Um, I often say to my clients, like, you have to kind of learn to parent yourself. It's amazing how many parents will say to me, oh, Kathleen, I had to eat that chocolate bar because I was out doing errands and I was starving. And I said, oh, I'll say to them, oh, interesting. Were you with your kids? Were they with you? And they're like, oh, yeah. I was like, okay, so what did you feed them? And the parent will be like, oh, I had some almonds in my purse for them, or I made sure they'd had a healthy lunch. So a lot of us are able to parent others, or they're able to parent their parent or a loved one, but then we fall short on ourselves. So sometimes it's just giving ourselves as much love and attention and awareness as we give to others, which is sort of connected to, they're all connected to number four, which is just being your own non-judgmental best friend. And, I think a lot of us have these really evil roommates living in our heads, we're telling us we're not good enough and speaking to us ourselves so meanly. And people will often, repeat their inner dialogue to me. And I will say, like, if you lived with that person, if that was your husband or your wife or your roommate, you could just tell them to get out the door, right? Like, you wouldn't put up with that. But for some reason, we put up with things in our own heads that just doesn't make any sense to me. So again, it sort of circles back to loving yourself enough to kind of be aware of your dialogue, maybe journal, see what you're thinking, and break it down. So stop using the sort of belittling self-talk, because the belittling self-talk really often can lead to forms of self-sabotage. So that's tip number 5, is sort of getting out of the ways that we all self-sabotage. And one of the big ones is this negative brain propaganda, right? I'm a mess up. I might as well not even try. I failed so many times in the past. This meal doesn't count. It'll be better tomorrow. I deserve. A big one, the negative brain propaganda is, the self sabotage is this I deserve mentality. Oh, I deserve this cookie. I've worked so hard today. And I'm not arguing don't eat the cookie. Again, like I love what I call my love it rule, which is, have moderate amounts of food that you love. But don't do it because you quote unquote deserve it. Like that's a way of letting yourself off the hook. Like decide you want it because you love it, but do you deserve to be putting bad food in your body? No, like what you deserve for your health is go for a walk or have some water, or we just justify really bad behaviors often with our sort of internal dialogue. And a lot of it is connected to number 6, which is just being curious about who you are and what you like. So a lot of people fall into this. I'm not the type of person who does X. So I'll say to them, you know what, maybe you should have a little bit of extra protein at breakfast. And they'll be like, oh no, I don't eat protein at breakfast. I have cereal. Or I'll say, why don't you consider going to the gym with a friend? Oh no, I don't want to go with a friend. Or whatever it is, there's always sort of a solution or like an excuse for every solution. So I always tease my clients that you got to be somebody who finds solutions versus excuses, and be curious, because the worst that happens is you try something and then you don't like it, and then you don't have to do it again. Like just because you try a workout doesn't mean you have to do it. A great example for me is yoga. For years I was like, I'm not a person who does yoga. Yoga's not my jam. And then a couple months ago, I was just thinking, I don't know, I needed something. And I was like, I'm going to do a 21-day yoga challenge because something is wrong, not wrong with my body, but off. I just felt like I needed something a little bit different. And by the end of 21 days, I really enjoyed yoga. Now, I will never be somebody who does 2 hours of yoga a day, but I now do sort of 10 to 15 minutes at the end of all my runs, and I feel so much better. And I'm 35, not 25, so I think that's part of it. Like what you need changes as you get older, but being curious is just so important. And then worst case, you don't like it. Like my mom once came to a spin class with me. I was teaching it, and we finished the spin class, and she got off the bike and she looked at me and she was like, Kathleen, I love you, and I will never do that again. Right? And so fine, she never does it again. She like literally hated it. She looked like she was going to vomit. But she loves yoga and she loves walking her dog. And so she has found her fit in those things. But I really appreciate that she was willing to kind of come try it. And then, she didn't like it. So she let it go. Number 7 is that your body's not a garbage can. So don't put crap into it. Like, don't treat it like one. Again, have small amounts of treats that you love. And, rest is really important. So I'm not arguing that you should never watch a movie, and I'm not arguing that you shouldn't take downtime. I love, my meditation. I love my sleep, but I also am very aware of the quality of meats that I put into my food, the quality of fresh fruits and vegetables, the amount of water, and everything in moderation. And, if I do decide to have chocolate, I try to make it, better quality. And I think of what my body needs and the fuel that it needs. So good quality food that's going to fill me with energy and allow me to do all the things that I want to do. And so tip number 8 is the idea of always eating from the top tiers of the cake, which is a visual that I love. If you think of like a wedding cake, and so the top tier would maybe be one treat. So for me, 1 or 2 Lindt chocolates. The second tier might be 3 or 4 Lindt chocolates. So each of the tiers get more. By the time you get down to the bottom end of the cake, it's like, 3,000-4,000 calories. And that's where you sort of have spiraled out of control. And you sort of go, okay, well, I already had 2 pieces of chocolate, so I might as well have 4, and then I might as well have some wine, and then I might as well have some beer. And the problem is that it's really hard to come back from the bottom tier of the cake. So a lot of people will go out and go on this binge and, eat 3,000 or 4,000 calories. And then they'll say to me, Kathleen, I'm going to be really good now. I'm going to get back on track. but then they're really good for a couple of days, which is great, but that doesn't really bring them back to where they started. So if you continually go to like tier 10 and continually are then only kind of good for 2 or 3 days, it's this negative spiral. So if you only ever go, sort of the top two tiers of the cake, you stay relatively healthy, and you can always go for a walk, you can go for a run, you can be healthy for a week or so and sort of get back to your normal, that's hard around the holidays, but it's really important around holidays or around your birthday or about any of those big celebrations, because it's easy to sort of let a birthday go for an entire month, right? And like every celebration you eat to tier 8, and then by the end of the month you're just like, oh my god, I feel terrible, right? But if at every celebration you sort of say, okay, I'm going to pick the one thing I love and do that, and then I'm also going to go for a walk. So connected to that is just this, number 9, which is demanding more of yourself. And connected to that is having compassion for yourself, but having compassion and demanding more because you love yourself, not because you hate yourself. So it's, holding yourself to a higher standard because you want to have energy and you want to be the fittest self that you can be. And, that's sort of connected to tip number 10, which is thriving in your own lane. So, don't compare yourself to others. Figure out what your version of fit is and work within your genetics. Like my dad always says, take your genetics and hit them out of the park. You don't need to look like your favorite celebrity. Doesn't matter what the best workout for them is. It only matters what works for you and what's best for you. And, it doesn't matter what somebody else's version of fit is. It doesn't matter if they want to go to CrossFit. I think you mentioned that in our pre-talk. CrossFit's not your jam. If that's not your version of fit, that's fine. If your version of fit is like my mom's, which is walking the dog and doing yoga, that's great. Just know you, do you, and then demand enough of yourself to be the best version of you that you can be. And that's sort of connected to this idea that health is not a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's a marathon. It's not, you can't change all of your unhealthy habits all in one day. And this is really connected to what you were talking about earlier, taking small steps at every moment, being like, okay, what's the one small little thing I can do better? If you're looking at a plate of food, maybe you have a little bit more vegetables and a little bit less of the unhealthy white carb. Or maybe you have a little bit more water. Or instead of having 2 glasses of wine, maybe you have 2 glasses of like a white wine spritzer. But it's like little choices that you make, and understanding that however long it took you to create a habit, like an unhealthy habit, take a long time to renew a healthier habit. And that's that marathon idea, sort of a marathon without a final end date, right? It just sort of keeps going and the process continues. And then the last 2 are very connected, and they're just learning to have greater inner stability and deal with stress. And I think that the inner stability is really connected to knowing that you are going to wobble, but you have to have mechanisms at the ready for when you do wobble. You have to know your triggers. You have to know that life is going to be stressful. So how are you going to deal with that? Instead of thinking like, well, when my stressful time in life is done, then I'll get healthy. You have to think, no, life is always some level of stress. So the health has to start now. And I have to sort of put steps together today that's going to help me in future, maybe more stressful times. So I know, for example, the more stressed I am, the more important it is for me to take moments to meditate and to sleep and to go for walks. Those things really calm me down. And if you can create the healthy habits in slightly lesser times of stress, then when you're actually in stress, hopefully you'll be able to maintain them for more. But it's about doing you and knowing. I find team sports extremely stressful, anxiety producing. So for me, if I'm already stressed, going out and playing a team sport is not going to make me feel better. It's going to make it worse. But for example, for my dad, who loves hockey, or my boyfriend James, he loves baseball, those things really de-stress him. Like if he's really stressed at work, he knows he wants to go play golf with a bunch of his friends. So, it's about knowing you and setting up systems that save yourself from your future self.
And each of those are wonderful in their own right. And I think it's good for someone to take some time to kind of go through each of those on a fairly.
That's a lot. I just gave a lot of
it is a lot. It is a lot.
Right?
But I don't want everyone to get overwhelmed and think, wow, I have to do all of those things.
No.
I think you can kind of look at each of them and say, where do I stand on this one thing? And so where you're talking about the top of the wedding cake, for example. I know I'm more of an all or nothing type of person. So I'm actually going to skip skip on the snacks, because I know if I start the snacks, it's going to start me on that same spiral that you were talking about. So that self-awareness, as you're looking at that and saying, am I a moderation type person or not? When you're looking at, demand more out of yourself, this is not about you being a drill sergeant.
No,
This
not at
is
all.
this is more, the way I kind of look at it is, if I told my wife I was going to pick her up at the airport at 5 a.m., I would be at the airport at 5 a.m. If I tell myself I'm going to go to the gym at 5 a.m., I'm going to the gym at 5 a.m.
Absolutely. It's connected to the living like you love yourself.
Yeah.
The parenting yourself or treating yourself like you would your spouse. Or I love that. I think your
So,
wife is very lucky to have you.
well, no, I'm very lucky to have her. And if I didn't pick her up, I'd be sleeping on the couch. So, uh, but I think each of those, as you kind of go through, take some time to just do some self-awareness meditation, for lack of a better word, where you just take the time and say, is this an area where I can get kind of a big movement, kind of get, is this going to move the needle for me if I really focus on this one right now? And you're going to find one or two, or maybe even three or four or five or six of those that are going to give you a kind of a push in the right direction. It's much the same when I talk about the GPS and I say, okay, we've got to look for those things in our psyche, in our head, and in our mind that are going to, in our body, that are going to work for us, and those things that won't work for us, and those ones that are, that's where the meat of this is. That's where you're going to get that big movement. So these 13 are really kind of a really good primer for you to go through that thought process to understand where you're going to be able to focus first, and get the most results early.
I love it. And it's so important to have this understanding that you are a unique being, and what will work for somebody else won't work for you. And I think a great, slightly funny example is one of my key Kathleenisms for myself is the worse my mood, the more important my workout. Because for me, working out is really about my mood. So if I'm in a bad mood, that's when I know I have to go for a walk or I have to go for a run. And I was speaking to one of my clients the other day, and she was like, Kathleen, I tried to use your motto of the worse my mood, the more important my workout. But then I just said to myself, well, I'm really not in a very bad mood. I'm in a better mood than I thought I was. So I guess I don't have to work out. So we just laughed. And it's a great example of how that motto just doesn't work for her. But for me, it's so powerful. So all of my book is about exactly what you said. Like, read it, and if it works for you, use it, and if it doesn't, move on to what does. And as you said about knowing if you're prone for moderation, or if you can have a few snacks or not. I love the idea of just sort of red foods, yellow foods, and green foods. So for me, I am not very good at moderation with a few foods like chocolate, but I'm very good at moderation with most other foods. So I know that sort of my red foods are my no-go foods. They're my foods that if I start, I can't stop. So I can't have them in the house. So that could be a helpful thing for people out there. Sort of understand, but again, it goes back to understanding who you are.
Yeah.
And maybe you're a moderate person in some situations and not others. Or my mom is amazing. She literally will have a bite of a shortbread cookie, which is her like love it food, and then put that shortbread cookie away. But I couldn't do that if it was in my house. So, it's all about knowing you and using what works for you, knowing that the end result, like that end goal is to be a fitter, happier version of you. And anything that's going to get you there, that's what you have to embrace.
I like that you brought up that we're all genuinely unique in the way that we need to approach our nutrition, our fitness, and our mindset. And you put these in the way you like to kind of look at putting together programs, I guess, or thinking about how you're going to improve yourself. You look at it from a form of making mixes.
Yes.
As I was listening, I was kind of like, well, like the mixtapes we used to make when we were kids.
Yes.
But so can you kind of talk about the concept of mixes and how they would apply to nutrition, fitness, and mindset?
Yeah. Well, it came about from a conversation I was having with my best friend, Emily. We've been friends for like since grade 10. And we were sitting having pedicures, and she always likes to ask me these questions. So she was asking me, I think that day was about intermittent fasting, but in general, she'll say, what do you think of this workout? Or what do you think of this nutrition program or diet or whatever? And I will always say something like, well, these are the pros, these are the cons. If you're this type of person, these pros will work for you. If you're this type of person, like this wouldn't work for you. And for some reason, I don't know, she's great at sort of marketing and PR. And she turned to me and she goes, that's your next book. And I was like, what? And she's like, well, the next book is that it's not about finding a program out there that's already created. It's about creating a mix that works for you, curating your own health, taking the pros of all the different stuff out there, being an educated mix maker and figuring out what works for you. And I was like, yeah, that is my philosophy. And she's like, you gotta write that book. So that's really what the book is. There's a couple chapters on workouts where I break down all the different workouts and the pros and the cons. And there's a couple chapters on nutrition. And I break down everything from, intermittent fasting to the Mediterranean diet to paleo. And then there's a couple chapters on mindset. And I really believe that it's about creating a mix that will work for you. The mix will change, based on your age. And understanding that you need all three mixes, right? Because most of us know what healthy food is and that we should look at, right? It's not rocket science to know that, you should eat more vegetables and move a little bit more, but knowing and doing are two very different things. So I actually don't believe that just having the knowledge of the workout and the nutrition mix is enough. The mindset mix is key because it's what allows you to connect the dots between wanting to do something and actually doing it. And I think that that's actually where most of the nutrition and fitness information out there breaks down. That sort of coaching aspect of how do you actually make yourself do it? How do you make yourself move? And that's where the book sort of outlines. That's why that you need all three mixes. And yeah, so that's sort of what I take you through. And it's about creating what's unique to you. And then knowing that if you create a mix and then it doesn't work, you can reformat it, or if it does work, but then in 5 years it no longer works, then that's great. That's okay. You're changing, you're evolving, and you can create a new mix.
Excellent. Now, you brought up this concept in the book that you called finding your kiwis.
Oh, I love that. Yes.
Yeah. Could you go through that with us?
Yeah. So again, it came from a conversation, this time with one of my amazing clients. And we were talking about nutrition, and she's a mother of 4. And she was talking about how she's constantly making food for other people, and she's making, this dinner for this child and this dinner for that child, and this person likes this food. And she was sort of feeling very overwhelmed about what she should eat. And I said to her, well, what do you like? And she's like, well, what do you mean? And I was like, well, you're talking about all the food you should make for other people, and you're talking about all the food that you're not allowed to eat. She was like, well, I can't have this and I can't have that. She was focusing a lot on others and what she was not allowed, which was making her just feel super overwhelmed and kind of depressed. And I said, okay, forget about what other people like and forget about what you're not allowed to eat. Tell me what is a healthy food that you love? What do you actually enjoy eating? She's like, well, I don't know. I really don't know. And she's like, well, my son likes Brussels sprouts. I was like, no, it doesn't matter. Forget about your son. What do you like? Anyway, the first thing that she could think that she actually enjoyed was a kiwi. So I started to talk with all my clients about finding your kiwis. And a kiwi could be a food that you love. It could also just be a form of exercise that you love. One of my favorite things to do is to put in a good podcast and go for a walk. And it calms me, it centers me, it makes me feel like I'm learning and, I don't know, getting outside. So that for me is a huge kiwi. I love raspberries, a huge kiwi. So kiwis are just healthy choices that you genuinely like. Choices that you feel like you're being pulled towards that choice versus something that you're making yourself do. And I think the more kiwis you can have in your mixes, the more likely you're actually going to stick to the mix, right? We can all make ourselves do things that we hate for a limited time. That's the problem with, big unrealistic goals. You can make yourself go to CrossFit or go running or whatever for a limited time. But if you genuinely hate those things, you're not going to stick with it long term. And I really believe that consistency matters. It's much more important what you will do on a consistent basis for the rest of your life than what you will do, once a month or once a year for an hour.
Yeah, I think the reason that I really like that concept was it does really pretty much get you focused on the positive things that you're doing in your
Yes.
life, and it gives you these little go tos. So let's say that today might be your hit training session, and you're just dreading it. And or the other day I was talking to one of my clients. He said, I just get so much anxiety on leg day that he just almost doesn't want to go, and then he goes and he feels great about it, but he's just so afraid that he's going to have a bad workout because they're so hard. And so I told him, I said, okay, well, there's going to be days you don't feel it, but it's not your body that's broke down, but you're just not feeling it. Or it might be that maybe you're planning to go to a buffet dinner and you know that there's going to be bad things. But if you have these kiwis, these ideas of things that you would rather do or really enjoy doing. So maybe today isn't the day for you to do the hit training. Maybe today is the day for you to go ahead and find a good podcast, get the headphones on and go for a walk. Or
Love it.
maybe today is you go in and you say, okay, what are some of my kiwis that are nowhere healthy? And you're kind of like, well, I really like Brussels sprouts. And you happen to see on the buffet, they've got Brussels sprouts. So you skip the bread, which would be one of my kryptonites, my red foods. And I'd say immediately, it's like, I've got to put Brussels sprouts on my plate first.
I
And
love it.
so I see that as a way that you can kind of take these and just have this inventory of these that can be there to help you and to motivate you, because they're going to be there all the time and very easy for you to do and feel good about.
Yeah, I think, again, it circles back to what we've talked about a couple times is this idea of the GPS of health. I think in my mind that the non negotiable is that I am working towards a fitter, happier, healthier, more joyful Kathleen. And if that's my non negotiable, then I work backwards and I figure out how I'm going to make that happen. And kiwis are often a way that I can make that happen, right? Another way to do it is I talk in the book about this idea of a plug and play list. So again, if your non-negotiable is that you move and you have as many sort of healthy foods as you can in your day, if you have a plug and play list already created, then it takes away some of the sort of cognitive energy. So you can be like, okay, in the list, it's exercise you can do in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Healthy food, kiwis you can make in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, right? And then if you think, okay, I just found 10 minutes. What can I do? Oh, I can dance around my house for 10 minutes. I can go for a quick walk. I can do some squats. I can make this food, this salad, because I've already prepared all the veggies, right? So I think a lot of the time with health, it can feel so overwhelming and it can feel discouraging and it can feel really joyless. And the combination of the kiwis and being sort of prepared with lists of kiwis and lists of things that just make it easy and convenient, it can take the sort of weight off our shoulders. And who wants to be healthy if it feels like this thing is like squishing you, right? If you constantly feel like the weight is on your shoulders, it's too much.
Yes. So Kathleen, following on that, I define wellness as being the healthiest, fittest, and happiest you can be. What are three strategies or tactics to get and stay well?
I love that question. So first, I'm going to talk about my recipe, and everybody listening will know already that this is just purely mine. So if it doesn't work for you, let it go. But I know that daily motion is key for me. So that I consider a non-negotiable, and it is 100% will make me feel better. So in a day, I want to try to fit in some type of motion. And that could be running, that could be, walking and listening to a podcast, that could be Pilates, that could be going to a fitness class with friends. I want to fit in some type of journaling or reflecting process. So, that could be going to see my therapist, but if I'm in between therapy sessions, it could be just writing in my journal for 5 minutes. It could even just be talking to a friend talking through an issue. And then I want some type of meaningful social interaction. And again, it could be just a phone call. I giving away my trade secrets of my relationship, but with my partner James, every night we do like a best and worst of the day, and like a gratitude moment. So those three things are sort of my grounding for a healthier, happier, fitter version of Kathleen. Motion, journaling, and reflection of some sort with a significant other. so that's me. But I think it's being aware enough of who I am and who I want to be, so I can be curious enough to continue. So keep going back to this curiosity being a really key thing, because I think that 20 years ago, if you'd asked me what would make me happy, I would have said chocolate and cheese and pasta. And if I'd said, well, I'm just not the type of person who likes to exercise, then I would never be where I am today. So much of it's being curious and knowing that that recipe that I just talked about will hopefully change as I get older. And I think so that would be my first one, is just, find your recipe, find what grounds you. And then the second one would be being always believing that there is a solution. And I credit my mom for this because, I hated being active when I was a kid. I was overweight, I was unhappy. And my mom said to me, Kathleen, you don't like being active, but there has to be a solution. So she got me a membership to the YMCA, and she said, maybe why you don't like being active is because being with kids your own age is really intimidating. So, maybe you'd be more comfortable with adults. So we got a membership, and I started walking on the treadmill for a couple of minutes, and I took those really small steps forward, as you spoke about earlier. And then the walking on the treadmill led to doing weights, which led to doing fitness classes, which led to me teaching fitness classes, which led to me deciding to do exercise science in university. And so I got where I am today. So yeah, that would be it. And then I think my final thing, and this is to quote Anne Lamott, or paraphrase anyway, is don't compare your warts, your messy insides, to other people's makeup face. Meaning comparison is so the thief of joy, and I think that social media can be wonderful if you use it in the right way. If you use, I love following people that I respect on Twitter and Instagram, and it's a great way to get new podcasts and get new information. But it can be really, really dangerous if you compare how you feel on the inside about yourself to how other people sort of look on social media. And I think that so much of health and fitness is getting out of this shame based, I hate myself, belittling self talk. Look at all those other people who have it all together, and realizing that we're all human and none of us have it really together, and we're all just doing the best we can. And, to be grateful for the fact that we can move, and that movement is a privilege, and to go from there with a sort of a generous spirit, and, knowing that we're all just sort of doing the best we can.
Well, yeah, those were wonderful. I appreciate that. I want to thank you also because you did put this podcast in the resources section of the book, which I just really, I can't say enough. I appreciate that so much. And there's a lot of other great resources back there as well.
Yeah, I love, it goes with my sort of curiosity mindset. I think that learning from other people is just so important, especially really people that inspire you. And, on days that I feel really low, and I do, absolute honesty, like I've suffered with, depression my entire life, and exercise and wonderful podcasts, and learning from other people really helped me stay on my happy, healthy horse. I can't tell people enough who's listening, growth mindset. Carol Dweck is amazing. Brené Brown, Gretchen Rubin, your book, your podcast. Like, just find people who motivate you, listen to them, be inspired by them. And if you're trying to figure out, what to do, often what's really useful is to sort of look at somebody, not in a comparison way, but sort of think, okay, interesting. They've done these things. What can I learn from them? What can I learn from their journey for my own self?
Absolutely. Now, if someone, you're going to do a little contest thing for us, and I'd like for you to talk about that. And then after you do that, if you could go through and tell us where people can learn more about you and learn more about the book, Your Fittest Future Self, please do.
Okay. Well, so the contest will be, I think, for anybody who comments on this podcast, and they will get to win my new book, Your Fittest Future Self, signed, my first book, which is called Finding Your Fit, and they kind of work well together, and also resistance bands, so you can get started doing some of the workouts that are in the book. So you just have to comment on the post, and then I will mail you the books. And if you have any questions, you can always get hold of me on my website, KathleenTrotter.com. I'm K Trotter Fitness on Twitter. I am Kathleen Trotter Fitness on Instagram and just Kathleen Trotter on Facebook. And I love chatting with people. I love answering questions. So just, get hold of me if you have any.
Okay. Well, this post is going to be at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/369. Again, 40plusfitnesspodcast /369. Leave a comment on the post and you'll be eligible to win that wonderful prize because they're both wonderful books. Kathleen's been on the podcast before, so I can tell you the other book is great too. And the fact that
I'm blushing.
the fact that she gave you is giving you the resistance fans as well. That's one of my favorite tools to share with my clients. So thank you, Kathleen, for that. And thank you for being a part of 40 Plus Fitness again.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure. I love your philosophy and you're wonderful to chat with. And I'm going to use some of your tips that you gave me with my people.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, today is the day. As this episode goes live, my wife Tammy and I are on an airplane headed down to Bocas del Toro, Panama. We are looking to relocate there and spend some of our retirement time on the islands of Bocas del Toro. Haven't really decided where we're going to live there yet, and we're going to rent a place for a couple months on the island. Then we're going to head mainland, spend some time in Panama City, Boquete, David, and probably Coronado. So we're going to check out the country. If you're in Panama and want to meet up for a coffee or something, please do reach out. My email is alan@40plusfitnesspodcast.com. Love to connect with you, or you can hit me up on Facebook at the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast Facebook group. You can go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/group and connect there. Maybe we can do a meetup of some sort. Just let me know. I want to get to know Panama, and if you can help me on that journey, I'd really appreciate it. Also, if you want to do something to help the podcast, there is something really, really big that you can do that's not going to be big from a pocketbook perspective, but would you consider being a Patreon for the podcast? There are some awards and things that you can get by being a Patreon. You can go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/Patreon. That's Patreon, and that will take you to our Patreon page. By being a Patreon, you're helping to support the podcast. There is an expense to running a podcast like this, so you'll help me cover those expenses. And then I do have some nice giveaways. If you are part of the Patreon program, you can check that out again at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/Patreon. And I want to thank the folks that are already a patron of the show, have been helping me out so far. I really do appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you so much for that. It really is a relief to see that I've got fans out there that are helping and want to support, keep the podcast going. So thank you for that. If you aren't, then you can go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/Patreon. And then finally, I did want to remind you again that the Wellness Roadmap is up for an Author Academy Award. You can go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/AAA. Scroll to the bottom of that page. There's a voting link there. Find us on page 6 in the health category. It's the Wellness Roadmap book by me, Alan Meisner. And you can get to it again with a link, direct link from our website, 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/AAA, and help us win an Author Academy Award. Thank you. Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, we meet Ruby Warrington and discuss her book, Sober Curious. Until then, have a happy and healthy day.